On December 7, 1941, Japanese fighter planes surprise attacked Pearl Harbor, damaging roughly 3,300 naval vessels, battleships, and airplanes, as well as killing 2,400 American soldiers and injuring 1,000 more. Starting as early as December 7th, the Federal Bureau of Investigation began arresting leaders of the Japanese community. They arrested 1,291 Americans, immigrants, and aliens. On December 8th, President Roosevelt asked Congress to declare war. After the attack on Pearl Harbor, fear, racism, suspicion, and propaganda followed Japanese Americans around. Regardless of any actual evidence to being loyal to their homeland, Japanese Americans suffered discrimination and were seen as a security risk. Roosevelt signed Executive Order 9066 on February of 1942, and the order itself was placed to protect the harm of Japanese citizens and aliens, as well as to prevent espionage. 2 months later, in March of 1942, President Roosevelt enacted Executive Order 9066, relocating anyone with 1/16 of Japanese lineage to Wartime Civil Control Authority assembly centers for up to 6 months, while the War Relocation Authority centers were being built. Overall, sending 120,000 Japanese and Japanese Americans for an average of 3.5 years did nothing to help the war efforts or protect America. The financial and psychological effects of the camps left many families with nothing, forcing them to start over again after years of hard work and labor. Here, there is no triumph for the Japanese community, only tragedy. Sending the Japanese community to concentration camps did nothing except negatively impact those interned by forcing them and sending them back financially, effectively creating health impacts and mental illnesses where there otherwise would have been none, hurt them and set them back in countless ways that could have been prevented had they not been interned. Long before Pearl Harbor, discrimination and racism was very much a thing. Many immigrated to America looking for better job opportunities and economic stability, but instead ended up working in the pineapple and sugarcane farms in Hawaii, or as railroad workers or farmers on the West Coast. Here in America, they were met with segregations of schools, churches, banks, and hospitals, anti-Japanese groups such as Japanese Exclusion League, and even laws against interracial marriages. In the events that followed Pearl Harbor, stereotypes and anti-Japanese propaganda increased. Curfews were set from 8 p.m. to 6 a.m. They labeled Japanese Americans as apes, drawing them as animals with little importance and slanted eyes, even labeling Japanese men as sexually aggressive and as a predator to female Caucasians. Many lost everything they had. Their homes had to be sold in a span of as much as 2 weeks or as little as 4 days. Their items and belongings that they could not carry with them were sold, lost, stolen, or vandalized. Their businesses were sold for little money or left because they could not find a buyer in time. Discrimination did not allow for friends outside the Japanese community to look after or maintain belongings and property. Stripped of everything they knew, they were forced into the internment camps. Their sense of safety, self-worth, and community were left behind with their belongings. The humiliating and degrading conditions inside the camps, such as subpar education, inferior housing and food, lack of privacy, and unacceptable medical care, drove many Japanese Americans to repressing their emotions concerning their prison-like situation. Inside some camps, many internees died directly of illnesses from lack of medical care. Families stopped being families as they stopped spending time together and started to hang out with friends their age. They were not allowed to practice Shinto or Buddhism inside the camps and were instead encouraged to practice Christianity. The camps themselves resembled prisons with watchtowers with soldiers accompanied by guns, and the poorly constructed housing units only had army cots and a single bare light bulb. There were no individual kitchens or bathrooms. Searchlights swept over the camp at night, adding to the feeling that they were being imprisoned. After the camps, those who returned to where they lived without any way of knowing what had become of their businesses, properties, homes, or belongings. Many came home and found their property lost, destroyed, or stolen. Violence and discrimination created roadblocks in getting homes, possessions, jobs, businesses, land, and financial stability. After being interned, they had to start over again. Some never made it back to where they had been and became homeless. Some families never reunited or only found each other decades after. The most common way to deal with the internment was suppressing their emotions and denial, which resulted in depression. The long-term psychological effects of being in prison include PTSD, anxiety, and depression. To the Japanese community, the Japanese internment camps are shameful to talk about, even within their family, and bring shame upon their family. After the internment camps, many Japanese Americans stopped practicing Japanese culture and speaking Japanese in an attempt to be seen as more American. After they were released, some never spoke another word again. Many did not want to face what had happened. The psychological damage this had on the interned Americans is comparable to victims of rape. Many Japanese Americans felt proud to be an American, but after they were interned, they lost faith in a country who would turn their backs to them. The Japanese American community turned to suicide after losing their jobs or being unable to work. Those who did not commit suicide took on low-paying jobs or relied on younger family members for help. When the children went back to school, they felt as if it was a constant struggle and fight to be seen as an American. The healing process of the pain from the camps took time because the U.S. government took so long to realize what they had done was wrong. The internment camps were in direct violation of the Bill of Rights. Their First Amendment rights were directly violated by enforcing rules that they are not allowed to practice Shinto or Buddhism inside camp perimeters, requiring them to speak English in public areas, restricting them from printing Japanese in the camp newspapers, and finally, the WRA violated the right to petition for a redress of grievances by labeling the few who did as troublemakers. Their Fourth Amendment rights were violated by conducting searches and seizures without warrants or probable cause. Their Fifth Amendment rights were violated by the forcible removal of Japanese Americans from their homes and imprisoning them, denying them speedy trials and access to legal representation, nor were they informed of their crimes while inside the camps. Their Eighth Amendment rights were violated by forcing them to stay inside the internment camps, which qualify as a cruel or unusual punishment. Their 15th Amendment rights were violated by not giving the internees a way to vote inside the camps. An example of this is the Korematsu case. Fred Korematsu refused to follow the order and did not leave his home. On May 30th, 1942, the FBI arrested Fred Korematsu. While in jail, Korematsu allowed the American Civil Liberties Union to make his case against the constitutionality of the order. In an unfair trial of the lower court, found him guilty of violating military orders. Korematsu was given 5 years probation and sent to an assembly center. Korematsu's legal team appealed, and again the conviction upheld. Korematsu asked the Supreme Court of the United States of America, and in a divided court 6-3, again, Korematsu was found guilty of violating military orders. A pro bono team reopened Korematsu's case with new evidence and cleared Korematsu's name 40 years later. Every basic human right was violated, as well as many constitutional ones. They did not have access to adequate medical care. Their schools did not meet the bare minimums to teach the children of those interned. The pay rate was way below average for the jobs they were doing. The meals were not enough, and the living situations were horrible. The Japanese internment camps are an example in present-day history of the effects and consequences of imprisoning innocent people. In today's age more than ever, we need to look back at our history and understand the effects of immigration, separation, discrimination, and injustices. In this day and age, it is pertinent for us to reflect on our past mistakes, especially in the wake of imprisoning the migrant children. Under Trump's zero-tolerance policy, children and teens were being ripped from their mothers and fathers every day and put into detention centers. The effects of this will last a lifetime for the children and their parents, while we go on in our everyday lives forgetting all about it. By looking back specifically at the Japanese internment camps, we can see many factors, some of which we still see today, that were present in making this tragedy, and we can stop them in their tracks today.